Have you ever stopped to wonder if what you call love might actually be just the fear of being alone? That the ache in your chest when someone leaves isn't really longing, it's withdrawal. Hardly anyone talks about this, but the truth is brutal. Attachment isn't romantic. It's an emotional prison dressed up as devotion. And the strangest part? Most people live inside that prison for years and call it home. Carl Jung once said that what you don't recognize in yourself, you end up projecting onto others. And that's where the real issue lies. You don't love a person. You cling to the image they awaken in you. You don't suffer because you lost them. You suffer because you lost the illusion, and that's why letting go feels impossible. Because you're not just trying to forget someone, you're trying to survive without the emotional anesthesia they once provided. But what if I told you it's possible to break free without turning cold? That you can love without losing your identity, and feel deeply without falling apart? In this video, you'll understand why attachment is a survival strategy of the ego, how shadow work can break that pattern, and what Carl Jung teaches us about building a kind of love that starts within, not in someone else. So take a deep breath, because this isn't just a talk about letting go. It's a quiet, powerful invitation to come home to yourself and never leave again. This isn't love, it's dependency. A lot of people mistake attachment for love, but there's a huge difference between truly loving someone and needing them just to feel whole. What looks like love, more often than not, is simply the fear of being alone, wrapped in pretty words. As Jung put it, real love comes from inner freedom, not from emotional hunger. When someone doesn't really know who they are, they tend to project their wounds onto others and call it passion, but that's not passion. It's a form of emotional captivity. Dependency is incredibly deceptive. It makes your heart race. Not from love, but from anxiety about whether you'll be accepted today. It convinces you that the roller coaster is intensity, when really it's just emotional instability. The ego latches onto any crumb of attention, mistaking it for connection. But real love isn't a crumb. And it should never be your anesthesia against the fear of losing yourself. It's strange how we learn to call love something that's really just an unconscious survival mechanism. People who grew up without genuine emotional validation, without being truly seen, heard, or held, often end up seeking in others what they never found in the mirror of their childhood. That's not romantic. It's a silent cry for help. It's like using someone else as a bandage for a wound that's never healed. But here's the truth. No bandage can bear the full weight of your pain. Eventually, it falls off. And when it does, panic sets in. Not because you've lost someone, but because now you're face to face with the emptiness that was always waiting underneath. This is where spirituality comes in. Not as a mystical escape, but as a fierce call to take responsibility for your own healing. No one is coming to save you. And honestly, no one should. Getting out of this cycle takes more than surface-level advice. It takes courage. Courage to dive into yourself, to meet the parts you've been avoiding. Shadow work, for example, is a powerful practice that helps reveal the unconscious dynamics shaping your relationships. Start by writing down the times you felt like you needed someone. Then ask yourself, what was I really looking for? Was it love or relief? Was it care or control? People who don't know themselves tend to seek partners who define them. But once you start recognizing your own inner archetypes, the orphan, the wounded lover, the savior, you begin to see that the person you called the love of your life might have just been a reflection of your pain. And as you grow more aware, you stop mistaking what drains you for what nourishes you. Because there's a big difference between feeling complete and just feeling numb. What most people don't realize is that emotional attachment is also a chemical reaction, quite literally. When you connect with someone intensely, especially during a vulnerable phase, your body releases a flood of dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. These feel-good chemicals create an unconscious link. This person is my safe haven. From that moment on, your brain starts registering them as a source of pleasure, comfort, and meaning. Carl Jung would say, the ego clings to anything it believes can complete its fragmented identity. And that flood of brain chemistry reinforces the illusion. What begins as enchantment quickly becomes fixation, and when that person pulls away, the brain doesn't just feel loss, it goes into withdrawal. It's like losing your daily dose of meaning. But was it really meaning, or was it just emotional addiction? Intensity is often mistaken for depth, but intensity is chemical. It comes fast, burns hot, and often leaves destruction in its wake. Depth, on the other hand, takes time. It asks for presence, honesty, and real connection. That's why it's so easy to feel like you're dissolving in an intense relationship. The light of the other blinds you to your own absence. The archetype of the lover, when imbalanced, seeks fusion, not connection. It wants to disappear into the other because it can't bear the weight of its own emptiness. And so everything becomes urgent, dramatic, obsessive. You're not actually addicted to the person. You're addicted to the feeling they trigger in you. And that feeling often has more to do with childhood memories of affection, rejection, or abandonment than with the reality of the present. Want a simple but revealing exercise? Write the name of the person you believe is the love of your life at the top of a page. Now, underneath, list everything they make you feel. Then ask yourself, when in my life have I felt these same things before? Chances are you'll realize that much of your attachment stems from reactivated emotional imprints, not from who that person truly is. Jung would call this a meeting between your shadow and the persona of the other, a dance of projections. So if you're feeling lost or dissolved in someone, maybe it's time to shift your focus. Meditation can help, but so can dream analysis or free writing. Anything that helps you uncover what your unconscious is really trying to show you, because only those who know who they are stop losing themselves in someone else. Some people don't fall in love. They get high on people. They use others like emotional substances, seeking quick relief for pain they can't even name. And like any drug, the initial high is addictive, but over time it turns destructive. Carl Jung might say, this is the ego's attempt to compensate for unhealed wounds, a way of seeking outside what hasn't yet been integrated inside. That person becomes a walking sedative. Their presence soothes you, but it doesn't heal you. Their absence, though, feels unbearable. You panic. You feel it in your body. Tight chest, shortness of breath, sleepless nights. That's not poetry. That's withdrawal. And like any addiction, your brain starts rationalizing the fix. But he gets me. She makes me feel alive. It's just a rough patch. But rough patches don't break you down every day. Love doesn't paralyze. If you find yourself stuck in a cycle of extreme highs and devastating lows, if one moment feels like paradise and the next like hell, you're likely caught in a system of emotional reward and punishment, not real connection. These dynamics often come from distorted relationship archetypes, the savior, the martyr, the dependent. And here's the dangerous twist, that addictive intensity can easily be mistaken for soul connection. Spiritual language, when misused, becomes a shield. People justify emotional chaos with phrases like karmic soulmates or we must have known each other in another life. But Jung would warn you, what you're calling destiny might actually be a trauma loop replaying itself over and over until you finally break the pattern. And that would be a real spiritual awakening. Here's a practical step. Try an emotional detox. No contact for 21 days, no texts, no checking their socials, no excuses to accidentally run into them, just silence. Watch how your body reacts. Anxiety, irritability, deep sadness. These aren't signs that you love too much. They're symptoms of bio-emotional dependency. Use this time to reconnect with yourself. Start small, symbolic rituals of self-care. Walk barefoot on the earth, write without filters, read something that brings you clarity. Try books like The Knight in Rusty Armor or Women Who Run with the Wolves. In this quiet return to yourself, the addiction starts to lose power. Because once you begin to fill your own cup, the other stops being your crutch. And then the real question emerges, one that most people avoid. Who are you without this person? Love doesn't need chains. Real love doesn't trap you, it expands you. But many people still confuse love with possession, care with control, and loyalty with surveillance. When someone says, "You're mine," it might sound romantic on the surface, but underneath, it often hides a deep fear of abandonment, a sense of not being enough, and a subconscious attempt to keep the other person as a shield against their own pain. Carl Jung warned that when the ego is insecure, it projects its underdeveloped parts onto others, expecting them to carry emotional burdens that aren't theirs. That's how invisible chains are born. Suddenly, your partner can't go out without notifying you, can't have too many friends, can't grow too much, because any movement threatens the fragile sandcastle your ego built to feel safe. But that's not love. That's emotional captivity. We need to break the myth that loving someone means merging with them to the point of disappearing. It doesn't. Love is about seeing the other clearly and choosing to stay even when they don't fit your ideal. Real love is the opposite of ego in disguise. If you need to shrink someone to feel bigger, what you're looking for isn't a partner, it's a submissive mirror. Healthy relationships are made of two whole people, not two broken halves clinging to each other out of fear. When you're okay with being you, you don't need chains, you need space. Space to grow together, to stumble, to reinvent yourselves. And here's where spirituality plays a key role, not in mystical romance, but as a daily reminder that no one belongs to anyone. Mature love understands impermanence without panic, and that's what truly sets you free. If you find yourself resonating with these emotional chains, take a moment to look closely at the patterns of jealousy and control in your relationships. Ask yourself, what do I forbid the other person from being, and what have I stopped being just to please them? These questions reveal where your persona, the social mask Jung described, has taken over the relationship. Personas fall in love with personas, not with real people. Try a role reversal exercise. Imagine your partner imposing the same rules on you that you impose on them. How would that feel? That discomfort you sense. It's where hidden disrespect is masquerading as care. Begin to have honest conversations with yourself about emotional freedom. A great place to start is by reading about relational archetypes like the lover, the rebel, and the caregiver. Because when you understand the roles your unconscious is playing, you stop performing. And finally, you begin to love for real. Energy-draining relationships. Not all exhaustion comes from overworking. Sometimes it's the result of people draining your emotional energy. There are relationships that don't feed you, they deplete you. And the danger is, from the outside, they look like love. But on the inside, they're nothing more than emotional vampirism. Jung would say that when the unconscious is wounded, it magnetizes what hasn't yet been integrated. So if you constantly find yourself giving too much, carrying others on your back, you might be stuck in the savior archetype, the belief that love must be earned by being useful. And when that pattern is active, emotional vampires show up. These are the people who always have a bigger crisis, a deeper wound, a louder need. In the beginning, it feels like intimacy. Then it turns into fatigue. Slowly, you get sick, not from the relationship's ending, but from how much of yourself you've poured into keeping it alive. The most painful part? People in these dynamics often feel like they owe something to the other person, as if love has to be paid for with sacrifice, patience, or self-betrayal. But true spirituality offers a hard truth. Love that demands you sacrifice your essence is not love. It's energetic submission. These toxic ties create a false dependency. The other needs your energy, and you need to feel needed. That's the trap. You start justifying everything. He had a tough childhood. She acts like this because she's been hurt. And before you know it, you've become their therapist, caretaker, or martyr. But that doesn't heal them. It only drains you. Jung would call this a projection of the shadow. When you're trying to save the other, what you're really doing is avoiding your own wound, the one that says you're not enough unless you're saving someone. But how long can you keep that up? If you want out of this prison disguised as devotion, start by checking your levels of depletion. Do you feel more tired after talking to this person? Do you feel guilty for saying no? Do you abandon yourself just to keep the peace? If the answer to any of these is yes, something is off. A helpful tool here is an energy journal. Track who you spend time with and how you feel afterward. Patterns will emerge, and with awareness comes choice. Start rebuilding your boundaries, even if slowly. Saying no is not rejection, it's self-respect. Read authors like Gabor Mate or Clarissa Pinkola Estes. They offer profound insight into these emotional patterns, because when you're surrounded by people who feed on your light, it's easy to forget that you too deserve to be nourished. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop bleeding for those who won't heal themselves. Letting go is an act of self-love. Letting go isn't about forgetting someone. It's about remembering yourself. Most people think detachment means coldness, cutting people off with no warning, shutting doors with a hardened heart. But in reality, it's one of the most sacred forms of self-respect. Jung taught that true growth begins when the ego stops clinging to what keeps it stuck. And attachment, more often than not, is a desperate attempt to keep alive something that already died inside you. You keep holding on, giving, reshaping yourself, losing pieces of who you are, all to avoid facing the silence that would come if you finally let go. But there's a quiet, radical beauty in the moment you stop and say, enough. That's when something in you wakes up, a part of you that's tired of begging for crumbs. A part that starts to remember that presence should never have to be earned. Emotional attachment is like living in a house full of memories, with all the windows locked. You walk around in circles, surrounded by the scent of what used to be, the promise that was never kept, the warmth that turned into indifference, the dreams you folded and stored away. And still, you stay. Because the ego fears the unknown more than it fears pain. It prefers the familiar ache to the risk of starting over. But detachment doesn't ask you to rush. It invites you to begin. It's like replanting a tree. You gently unearth the old roots, clear the soil, and then choose where to grow again. Shadow work can help immensely in this process. When you dive deep into your hidden emotions, you may realize you're not actually attached to the person, but to the story you created about them, to the version of yourself who still believes that story matters. And once you see that, everything begins to shift. Here's a simple but powerful exercise. Take a piece of paper and write this question at the top. What am I still trying to save that no longer saves me? Read it out loud. Sit with it. Let whatever comes, come. Then burn the paper. That act, as symbolic as it is, can mark the start of a new narrative. Reinforce it with small acts of reconnection. Cook something just for you. Revisit a hobby you abandoned. Read something that brings you back to center, like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. True spirituality doesn't live in grand gestures. It lives in the daily, deliberate acts that quietly declare, I'm coming back to myself. Because detachment isn't about losing something. It's about recovering yourself. And that recovery prepares you for something even deeper. Finally understanding why you were so attached in the first place. The root of attachment is in your childhood. The attachment holding you captive today didn't start in adulthood. It began long before you knew what love even meant. In those early, tender years, when your soul was still a sponge, soaking up everything, the silences, the glances, the touch, or the lack of it. Jung believed that the unconscious holds the imprint of childhood like invisible tattoos. What wasn't welcomed then turns into longing later. A child who didn't feel seen learns to chase visibility at all costs. A child who was rejected learns to beg for acceptance. And so we grow up carrying a starved ego, not hungry for real love, but for the emotional nourishment we should have received from our caregivers. But now we project that hunger onto partners, friends, sometimes even strangers, hoping once again to be chosen. The painful truth: no one can give your inner child what she didn't get, except you. And as long as that wounded part of you is driving your love life, your relationships will feel like déjà vu. You'll fall in love, lose yourself, get hurt, repeat, because deep down, you're not looking for a partner. You're looking for a parent. Someone to hold you emotionally in a way you were never held. But healing doesn't happen in someone else's arms. It begins the moment you finally sit with your own pain and whisper, "I'm here now." If you want to start that healing process, try writing a letter to yourself at age 6. Say what that child needed to hear. Then read the letter aloud while looking at yourself in the mirror. It may feel strange, but symbolically, it's incredibly powerful. Reinforce it with reparenting rituals. Create a gentle bedtime routine. Choose your meals with care. Hug yourself when you wake up. Read about John Bowlby's attachment theory or explore Jung's writings on the archetype of the divine child. They'll remind you that your childhood pain doesn't have to be a cage. It can be a doorway. Because the moment you understand where your attachment began, you begin to reclaim your freedom. And from that freedom, something unexpected happens. Love stops being a search and starts becoming a meeting. You're in love with a fantasy, not a person. One of the hardest truths to face about love is this: many times, you're not actually in love with a real person. You're in love with the story you created about them. Carl Jung would call this a projection, when the ego casts onto another all the parts of yourself you haven't yet acknowledged, idealizing them into who you want them to be. And so you begin to see only what you want to see, not the human being in front of you, with flaws, shadows, and limitations, but a character that fits your unmet needs perfectly. The real problem starts when reality shows up. When the person begins to reveal who they truly are and it doesn't match the fantasy, that's when the crisis hits. Not because they changed or let you down, but because they shattered your illusion. And rather than let it go, many people cling even harder, trying to force the relationship to remain something it never actually was. That fantasy, by the way, isn't random. It's stitched together from pieces of your past. Someone you once admired, dreams you never fulfilled, emotional patterns you've repeated over and over. And here's where spirituality can become dangerous if misunderstood. We start saying things like, "It's a soul connection. The universe brought us together. It's a sign." But real signs don't chain you to dependency. They wake you up. And true love doesn't need symbolic makeup. It can handle the weight of truth. When you love a fantasy, the relationship becomes one-sided. You're loving alone, and worse, you're using that person as a blank canvas to project everything you wish you could feel or be. That's risky, because every time they step out of character, it feels like betrayal. You stop relating to who they are and start demanding they stick to the script you wrote. Want to see this clearly? Write down 3 qualities you admire most in this person, without overthinking. Now ask yourself, do these qualities really exist, or did I want to see them? Often, what we call admiration is just hope in disguise, and hope has a way of clouding reality. To start breaking the illusion, try this practice. For 1 week, observe them neutrally. No justifying, no romanticizing, just see. And also, observe yourself. What were you hoping this relationship would deliver? What role did you cast them in? A great book for this process is The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. It can help you separate projection from presence, because real love begins the moment you stop falling for characters and start recognizing real people. The mask you wear to avoid being left at some point. We've all worn a mask just to be loved. Some people learned early on to be too good. Others became too strong. Some turned into the clown, the caretaker, the rebel. These masks don't appear out of nowhere. They're survival strategies, formed in childhood, when you realize that simply being yourself might not be enough to guarantee affection. Jung called this the persona, the character you present to the world to gain acceptance and belonging. The danger is, over time, you start confusing the mask with your real self. You smile when you want to cry. You agree when you want to scream. You stay when you want to leave. All of it just to avoid being left behind. But the most brutal form of abandonment doesn't come from others. It comes from you. Every time you hide who you really are just to be liked. This persona fits perfectly in the social world. You'll be praised for it, admired, even loved, but you'll feel empty. Why? Because people aren't loving you. They're loving the version of you that doesn't actually exist. And that's exhausting. You keep asking, why doesn't anyone really see me? But how could they, if you never show up as you are? True spirituality isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. The courage to say, this is who I am, both light and shadow. And that's where shadow work becomes transformational. When you begin to face what you've hidden, you realize that being fully yourself might be scary, but it's also liberating, because your soul doesn't want applause, it wants truth. And as long as you're living to avoid abandonment, you're living a life that's not yours. If you want to take a step toward change, start by identifying the roles you constantly play in your relationships. Are you always the one who gives, the one who fixes, the one who never complains? Write them down. Then ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped being this way? Read your answer with honesty. The fear that rises, that's where your healing begins. Now practice small acts of authenticity. Say no where you usually say yes. Admit when you're tired. Share an opinion you'd normally hide. It will feel uncomfortable, but that's exactly how the cycle breaks. Jung's work on the shadow and the inner orphan archetypes can help here, because only when you take off the mask does real love have a chance to find you. And maybe then you'll realize the deepest wound wasn't abandonment by others, but by yourself. Love that makes you sick. Some people get sick in the name of love, and they don't even realize it. They tolerate silences that hurt, normalize words that wound, and call just a phase what has already become a pattern. Carl Jung would say that when the ego is disconnected from the self, it begins to romanticize absence and normalize pain. Suffering becomes a strange form of loyalty, a belief that if you just hold on a little longer, they'll change. But that's not love. That's emotional deterioration rooted in the belief that you have to suffer to be worthy. Behind it all, there's often a heart that has never truly been prioritized, not by others and not even by the one who carries it. These kinds of relationships don't just drain your spirit, they take a toll on your body too. Anxiety, insomnia, stomach issues, panic attacks. Your body starts to scream what your voice hasn't dared to say. And still, you stay, out of fear, guilt, or habit. Because you've disconnected so deeply from yourself, you no longer know how to tell the difference between love and attachment. That's where true spirituality becomes a flashlight in the dark. It reminds you, real love doesn't hurt you. It doesn't shrink you. It doesn't hollow you out. Love heals, love grounds, love gives you space to breathe. So if something is eating you alive from the inside, it's no longer love, if it ever was. But gaining that clarity is terrifying, because it demands action, and action means rupture. You're not just letting go of someone, you're letting go of the version of yourself who believed this was the best you could get, and that goodbye hurts. If you want to start breaking this cycle, begin by noticing the small signs. Are you constantly on edge? Do you feel like you're always the one holding the pieces together? Does your happiness depend entirely on whether the other person is in a good mood? If so, something is off balance. Do a daily emotional check-in. Make a list. When do I feel peace? When do I feel tension? And then look, where does the person you love appear most? That one exercise can open your eyes in ways years of overthinking never will. From there, start to rebuild a new definition of love, one that includes you. A book I highly recommend here is Women Who Love Too Much by Robin Norwood. But let's be clear, this isn't a book about them. It's a book about you. Because healing from emotional burnout takes courage, but it gives you your life back. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to finally choose that life. The greatest love story of your life is with yourself. As long as you keep looking for someone else to give you what only you can give yourself, every relationship will just mirror your own absence. Carl Jung once said, "What you do not bring to consciousness will control you." And that's exactly why so many people get lost in shallow love stories, because they've never had a deep encounter with themselves. It's a hard truth, but it's also liberating. No one is going to save you. Your healing won't come from the right person. It begins the moment you sit down with your own loneliness and listen. In the quiet of your soul, you start to realize that the love you've been chasing out there was the love you've been withholding from yourself all along. And once that inner connection happens, the outside starts to change, because the longest, most profound and sacred relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with you. But that doesn't mean isolating yourself or pretending you don't need anyone. It means changing your starting point. Most people love from their wounds. Love me so I can feel lovable. But real spirituality invites something else entirely. I love myself, and from that fullness I'm able to share. And that shift begins with small, powerful choices, choosing what nourishes you, not what numbs you, saying yes only when you truly mean it, celebrating your wins even when no one is watching. Shadow work can help you get there. It shows you the places where you abandoned yourself for the sake of approval, and from there, a process begins, a quiet, daily reconciliation with the parts of you that froze in time. Because self-love isn't a destination, it's a daily ritual. If you want to nurture that relationship, start with a simple gesture. Write a love letter to yourself. List your strengths, your growth, your silent victories. Read it whenever you feel like you're slipping away again. Create personal rituals. A quiet coffee in the morning, a mindful walk, a slow shower at night. Acts that say, "I matter to me." Authors like Carl Rogers or Brené Brown are powerful companions on this path. They'll remind you that self-compassion is more radical than it seems. Because the world taught you to chase outside validation, but never taught you how to come home to yourself. And maybe that's the new story you're meant to write, one where you are the main character. When that happens, something shifts. You stop chasing intense love stories and start living whole ones. The love of your life was never someone else. It was always you. You've spent years waiting for someone to prove you could be loved exactly as you are. But maybe you forgot the most important thing, that someone has always been you. Carl Jung said the journey of individuation is the return to essence. The moment the ego stops searching outward and starts reconciling with the self, that's where the real love of your life is born. It's not someone who comes to complete you. It's the version of you that finally wakes up, the one who's done chasing approval, who doesn't need permission to exist. who's tired of being a projection of everyone else's expectations. That love isn't loud, it's steady, it's presence. And it begins the moment you say, I won't abandon myself anymore. That's the love that stays when no one else does. That holds your hand when even you are hard to love. That reminds you, gently but firmly, you don't have to shrink to fit inside anyone's heart, that love isn't poetry, it's commitment. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I've got you. Spirituality becomes alive in this space. Every time you choose truth over performance, it's a prayer. Every boundary you honor is an offering. Every time you say, this no longer serves me, you're building an altar inside yourself. And on that altar, there's no room for idolizing someone else, only reverence for the person you're becoming. Want to mark the beginning of that love story? Do something you've never done for yourself. Buy yourself a ring, not to marry someone else, but to commit to your own soul. Write your vows, declare a yes day just for you. A day where every choice is made with you, for you, because of you. Notice what awakens in you. Read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Watch talks on presence and individuation. But most of all, listen to yourself, because the love of your life is not out there. It's in here. And when you love yourself like that, with no effort, no performance, no mask, the world notices, and every love that follows will be a choice, not a need. Now that you've made it this far, let me ask you, how many times have you abandoned yourself just to keep someone close? How many versions of yourself have you silently killed just to stay lovable? The truth is, letting go isn't about stopping the feelings. It's about stopping the self-betrayal. And if there's one thing you take from this video, let it be this. No one will ever fill the space you keep refusing to inhabit. So here's an invitation. Starting today, choose what nourishes you, not what numbs you. Face your shadow, talk to your inner child, question your ego, and every time you feel like chasing someone, come running back to yourself. But remember, this is only the beginning. In the next videos, we'll go even deeper. We'll talk about the archetypes shaping your relationships, how your family story programmed your love patterns, and what you can actually do to stop repeating cycles that only hurt you. This channel isn't just content, it's a journey. And if something inside you woke up today, then you already know where to return whenever you need to find yourself again. So subscribe now, turn on notifications, and I'll meet you in the next episode. Because your healing journey isn't meant to be walked alone.